Welcome to the InfoMullet YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, please like or share. And if you'd like to support the InfoMullet by becoming a mulleteer, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate your support. For those who have been following for a while, we actually, on the InfoMullet, I made a series of forecasts March 2nd or 3rd. So really at the beginning of the US outbreak, I made what I called ambiguity forecasts. And then in late March, a group called IHME, which is a data processing group for healthcare analytics out of the University of Washington, they created a separate model, and that model was very influential in the White House. So what I did in late March is I froze the forecast. I took the IHME data as of March 30th. You can see the sources up here, and I plotted it for the next 6 weeks to sort of the wave one, so we could get a feeling. And I also, here's the source of the InfoMullet ones. And how I plotted this is I put bands at sort of mental models or mental milestones. So here on the left is the total number of deaths. Now, this is total deaths, not per capita. And you can see here these bands are sort of just ways of conceiving these numbers. And these are the total US casualties for these different things. So the entire global war on terror for US casualties, not anyone else, over 19 years is down here. An average flu season is down here. The Vietnam War, all 9 years of the US involvement in Vietnam War, it's about 60,000 dead, is up here. The 2018 flu season, which is the worst flu season in the last 30 years, 82,000 dead, it's up here, and World War I casualties for the US is here. And we plotted these forecasts, and you can see there were some high ones from the InfoMullet and some low ones. And COVID, they're in the brown, and the IHME ones are in blue. And what's amazing to me is how close IHME's midpoint range. So they had a mid-range estimate on March 30th, and they estimated by May 15th, we would be right around, and they nailed it. I mean, the red is the actual deaths. So I've been tracking the deaths per day, and it's not usual you see a forecast be that accurate. And they've gotten a lot of grief, which is kind of unfair because the purpose of their models is to shift as the data shifts to give guidance to the hospitals. They're trying to guide hospital decisions like how many beds do you need, where do you need them, where does the healthcare. So they adjust their forecast regularly, just like you would a hurricane track. They're constantly changing based off what the weather is. This is supposed to be useful. What I did is I froze their forecast at a point in time because I wanted to see, well, their assumption that underlied this is that the US would only partially practice social distancing. Now, when we went into lockdown, they changed their forecast because we're in lockdown. But you look at it in hindsight, and if you look over the course of the 6 weeks, we have been mixed in social distancing. Georgia was like, coming up to the pool and dipping the toe in the water, and it's, a lockdown for a week or two. Oh, we're done with lockdown. And other states have reopened. Now the majority of states are in some phase of reopening. So I think it was their assumption that they built in at the end of March that social distancing would be mixed at best was an accurate assumption, and their mid-range estimate is almost dead on. So in a way, this is kind of like, let's all give a round of applause to IHMEA for getting this right, which is not easy. And this obviously only goes through May 15th, so it stops at a point in time. And by the way, note this InfoMullet case number 4, that's the closest one I did, which is sort of the mid-range of my estimates. But I've been tracking the daily new cases, or the daily new deaths. So this is deaths per day. And you can see here, each one in blue is the number of deaths with the 5-day moving average. And again, these little shaded areas, this is when New York issued a large revision just to sort of explain a bump. And you can see here the wave 1 peak, and then this gradual decline over time. Now, I don't want to oversell this decline. We are still losing between 1,000 and 1,500 people a day to COVID-19. It is declining over time, but it's a very gradual decline, and we're always at risk with this reopening of sort of sparking this wave 1.5. I've said for a couple weeks, wave 1.5 is coming. I'd love to be wrong. If I'm wrong, happy day. That means the deaths continue to go down, and we'll probably crest out at around 100 to 110,000 by mid-June, but I expect those deaths to reverse and increase because we're reopening in the midst of this, and we probably be closer to 130 to 140,000 deaths. So this is the update of where the forecasts are. And just by way of that one InfoMullet forecast, I wanted to share this. So this was in early March that I made this forecast. It was like March 2nd. And this is the case number 4. And what we did with these cases is we took the data coming out of China and just assumed certain levels of ambiguity. So like case number 1 is that China's underreporting cases by tenfold, or their case number 2 or 3 might be they're underreporting deaths by tenfold. We were playing with the data using ambiguity assumptions and then applying those factors to the United States. So the one that it was closest to, case number 4, assumed that China's data was accurate, but instead of the cases being evenly spread across Hubei province, which has 65 million people, we said that 80% of those cases are concentrated in Wuhan City that only had 11 million people. Now, remember, at the time, we didn't know where the cases were located. This was an assumption. And what that did is it reduced the infectivity rate while keeping the crude fatality rate about the same here. And when we applied it to the US, we ended up with an estimate of wave 1, 1.6 million infected, and a number of mild cases, severe and critical, and 67,650 deaths. Well, as of May 15th, the actual result was 1.4 million cases, so that was about 12% off, and 87,000 deaths, which is about 22% off. Not bad for a back-of-the-napkin estimate made on March 2nd to where we are now. I mean, this was not like a simulation model. This was just using some techniques I learned in the military to, in situations of high ambiguity and uncertainty, you play with that uncertainty, quantify it, and make estimates. This, by the way, is the spread of all the forecasts that were done in that exercise, and I called out case number 2 because case number 4 is where we're closest to now, but it's possible that we may be heading toward case number 2, and if you see it has 135,000 deaths, as I said, that's where I'm thinking we might end up because we reopened, and 3.3 million infected. Now, that case assumes that China underreported their total infected and total deaths by tenfold, which, as we know, after I made these forecasts, China announced a revision of about 50%, nowhere near tenfold. So, but we don't know if that revision was, completely disclosing everything or was just a partial revision. So again, we're sitting right now between these two forecasts, one of which turned out to be very accurate, that it's a very localized virus, it clusters in local areas, and the other of which is China was underreporting their data by about tenfold. So again, this is, I like doing reviews of these because when you do forecasts, the point is not to get it right. You don't do forecasts to get perfect accuracy and nail it on a dime at a point in time. The point of a forecast is to make clear your assumptions, provide an explanatory theory of how the world's going to work, and then go back and look and say, is this actually how the world worked? You go back and review it. This is why I freeze them at a point in time. So the purpose of these forecasts, the reason I'm going back to them now is to say, all right, we've lived through this time period. What was accurate? What was right? What was wrong? I had some forecasts that were way off that assumed a 20 to 30-fold under ambiguity level, and that had somewhere between 270,000 and 450,000 deaths. We're nowhere near that right now. So, I mean, it's useful to be wrong on forecasts, and the reason we make multiple forecasts is so we can understand which one had the better explanatory theory. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow the InfoMullet, visit us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like notifications when we post new video content, click on the red subscribe button below the video. If you've ever wanted to become a mulleteer and support the InfoMullet, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate the support.